Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really digging into something special. The soundscape of Nashville, Tennessee, specifically RCA Studio B.
Yeah, it's iconic, and it's more than just, bricks and mortar and old tape machines.
Exactly. It's like a cornerstone of music history. We're talking genre evolution, legendary sounds, the whole package. We've pulled together historical articles, music industry stuff, even architectural bits to get the full picture.
And our mission really is to go beyond just the dates and names.
Yeah.
We want you to really feel the cultural impact, uncover maybe some surprising details you haven't heard before.
Get a richer understanding, yeah. And for starters, you've probably heard RCA Studio B called the house that Elvis built.
Right, everyone knows that phrase.
And while, yeah, Elvis is a huge part of the story, it's definitely not just out the king. There's so much more going on.
Absolutely. So to really get it, we kind of need to set the scene first. What was Nashville like before Studio B opened in '57?
Right, what was the vibe?
Well, it might surprise you, but back then, Nashville didn't have any permanent studios set up by the major labels. Nothing like that.
Really? Even with the Grand Ole Opry and WSM Radio being such huge deals?
Yeah, it was mostly scouting crews coming down from New York, Chicago, making trips, recording talent when they found it.
Huh. Though didn't Victor Talking Machine Company, RCA's predecessor, come down way back in like 1928?
That's a great point they did. Spent a week recording Opry folks.
Yeah.
So the potential was definitely recognized early on.
Little hint of things to come.
Exactly. But the first, modern commercial recording session, that happened almost by accident in 1944.
Oh, yeah. How so?
RCA's New York studios were totally booked. So they suggested Eddie Arnold just record locally at WSM Studio B. They even sent down an engineer, Percy White, to help out the WSM guys.
Wow. Talk about being in the right place at the right time. And that sparked something.
It seems like it did, because some of those WSM engineers, Aaron Shelton, Carl Jenkins, George Reynolds, they saw an opportunity.
And started their own thing.
Yep. They launched Castle Recording Laboratory. It was Nashville's very first commercial studio service, available to basically anyone.
Okay, so that's a big step.
Huge. They started at WSM, then moved to the Tulane Hotel. And interestingly, they quickly became the go-to for almost all the major labels, except RCA Victor.
Why not RCA?
Seems it was down to different engineers' unions. RCA had an exclusive deal with another one.
Ah, okay. Still, Castle must have really put Nashville on the map for recording.
Oh, definitely. Their recordings, using tons of Opry musicians, they were getting national airplay, hitting the Billboard charts constantly.
So that raised the city's profile.
Massively. It elevated the studio, Nashville music in general, and even started drawing big artists to Nashville just to work with those session players everyone wanted.
Right.
By 1950, Variety was already calling Nashville a small edition of New York's Tin Pan Alley.
That's fast growth. And Castle wasn't alone for long, right? Others popped up.
Exactly. Castle showed it could be done. So you got Monogram Radio Productions, the Brown Brothers studio, and then the Bradley brothers, Harold and Owen, set up shop too.
The Bradley brothers, okay, they become important later too.
Very. By 1955, they had their third studio going on 16th Avenue South. And that move, that really marks the beginning of what we now call Music Row.
So the pieces are falling into place even before RCA commits fully, but RCA was recording there sometimes.
Yeah, they've been doing sessions in Nashville since 1950, but it was always temporary setups. Brown Brothers studio, a garage at one point, apparently.
A garage, seriously.
Yeah. Then from 55, they rented a place on McGavick Street part-time. But the key guys for RCA, Steve Scholes and Chet Atkins.
The legendary Chet Atkins.
Right, guitarist, producer, RCA artist. Neither he nor Scholes were really happy with the McGavick Street setup. They wanted something permanent, something better.
And they convinced RCA.
Their push was definitely a big factor. They persuaded RCA to finally invest properly in Nashville.
Which leads us directly to the opening of RCA Studio B.
Exactly. October 1957. It was built by a local businessman, Dan Maddox, right there at 17th Ave South, and Hawkins Street, now Music Square West, and Roy Acuff Place. Iconic corner.
And RCA took a long lease.
Yep, a long-term lease. The design was handled by RCA's chief engineer, William Miltenberg, and this opening, it was a landmark moment.
Why so significant?
Because it was the first studio in Nashville actually built and run by a major label. It showed real faith in the city's music scene and basically cemented Music Row as the center of it all.
Okay, so Studio B opens its doors. What happens next? What's the immediate effect?
Well, it's huge. It gives Nashville instant credibility,
Yeah?
And almost right away, the studio gets tangled up with the rise of the Nashville sound.
Ah, the famous Nashville sound. Break that down for us. What defined it?
It really started bubbling up in the mid-50s. It was Nashville's answer to, well, everything changing in music, especially rock and roll taking off.
So how did it sound different?
Smoother vocals, more pop-influenced. They started bringing in string sections, horns, moving away a bit from the hardcore fiddle and steel guitar sound.
And background vocals, too.
Yeah, polished background harmonies were a big part of it. And the key architects were Chet Atkins, right there at Studio B, and Owen Bradley over at his place.
It sounds like a conscious decision, almost strategic.
It really was. It
Yeah.
wasn't just a random trend. It showed Nashville could adapt, blend its country roots with pop sounds to grab a bigger audience. That savviness really helped solidify its place nationally.
Makes sense. And wasn't there a specific piece of tech that became crucial to this sound? The echo chamber?
Oh, absolutely pivotal, the echo chamber. Its use in country really got a boost after Ferlin Husky's hit Gone.
Right, that record had a ton of reverb.
Exactly. And that was done at Bradley's studio, kind of a makeshift echo setup. So when RCA designed Studio B, they built a dedicated echo chamber right in, second floor, above the control room.
Purpose-built echo.
Yeah, and it wasn't just a gimmick. It added this amazing space, this atmosphere, this emotional weight to the recordings. Became a real signature of that era's sound.
So how did it actually work? What was in the chamber?
It was basically a small, really live room, plaster walls, ceiling coated in shellac, very reflective surfaces.
Okay.
Inside, you had a speaker and at least one microphone. During recording, you'd send part of the signal, say, the vocal, up to that speaker.
Right.
The sound bounces all around those hard walls, creating natural reverb. The microphone picks up that reverberated sound.
It sends it back downstairs.
Exactly. Back to the mixing console. Then the engineer could blend that wet echo signal with the original dry sound to get just the right amount of effect.
That's clever. And you mentioned they even used a stairwell for that.
Yeah. Back at the McGavick Street place for Elvis's Heartbreak Hotel, no less. They just stuck a mic and speaker in a stairwell to get some echo.
Resourceful.
Amazing. Okay. We can't really talk Studio B without diving into Elvis Presley. What was his connection to Nashville before the studio opened? Right, his Nashville story starts earlier. He played the Opry back in '54, though it didn't exactly go over brilliantly.
Yeah, I heard that story.
But crucially, he recorded Heartbreak Hotel in Nashville in '56 at that McGavick Street studio.
Yeah.
And his manager, the Colonel, Tom Parker, based in Nashville, so the city was already important for him.
Okay. And when did he first step into the new RCA Studio B?
His first sessions there were June 10th and 11th, 1958. He was actually on leave from the Army.
While on leave. Wow. What did he cut?
Some absolute classics.
Yeah.
I Need Your Love Tonight, A Big Hunk of Love, Ain't That Lovin' You, Baby.
Yeah.
Now and then there's a fool such as I, and I got stung. Quite a couple of days.
Definitely. So Elvis arrives at Studio B just as this Nashville sound is taking shape. How did his music, his rock and roll, fit in? Or did it challenge it?
That's actually a really interesting dynamic. Elvis's massive success with rock and roll, it kind of indirectly pushed the Nashville sound forward.
How so?
Well, rock and roll was so dominant in the late 50s that country record sales actually dipped for a bit.
Oh, right.
So that pressure basically forced Nashville producers like Atkins and Bradley to innovate, to create a sound, the Nashville sound that could compete, appeal more broadly, bring in some pop elements.
So Elvis wasn't making Nashville sound records, but his impact created the market conditions for it to thrive.
You could definitely argue that, yeah. It's fascinating, too, how Studio B was ground zero for the polished Nashville sound. But later, it also became home to recordings that were part of the reaction against it.
The outlaw movement.
Exactly. Shows that cycle in music, you know.
Yeah.
One sound gets big, and something else bubbles up in response.
That's a great insight. I read about a 1958 article, Nashville Booms as Music Mecca. What did it say?
Oh, yeah, that piece really captures the moment. You called Nashville a shrine for label reps who were flocking there.
Why shrine?
They were looking for local talent, sure, but also specifically to capture that Nashville sound. The article stressed how fresh it was compared to other music centers, how many Nashville hits were climbing the Nashville charts.
Did it mention Chet Atkins?
Explicitly. Highlighted his incredible run of hits coming out of RCA.
And many of those hits were coming straight out of Studio B. Give us some examples of those quintessential early Nashville soundtracks from there.
Oh, absolutely. You've got Don Gibson's A Lonesome Me and the classic I Can't Stop Loving You.
Timeless.
The Browns, the Three Bells, Jim Reeves' Super Smooth, He'll Have to Go.
That's a perfect example.
Skeeter Davis's The End of the World, Bobby Bear's Detroit City. Just huge, defining records.
And these often featured the A-Team session guys.
Yes, that legendary crew of Nashville session musicians. They were incredible, just masters of delivering that polished, sophisticated sound that producers were looking for.
You can really hear the difference compared to, say, early Hank Williams. The instrumentation, the whole production style.
Totally different worlds, yeah. That's the Nashville sound in action.
And commercially, the sound just took off.
Phenomenally successful. By 1960, Time magazine was reporting Nashville was the #2 record-producing city in the U.S., only behind New York.
Number 2.
Yeah, and they said something like 1 out of every 5 hit records the previous year came out of Nashville. That success also fueled massive growth in country radio stations nationwide.
So RCA's investment in Nashville, in Studio B, it paid off big time.
Hugely. You could say it was one of the smartest bets in music business history.
So moving into the 1960s, did RCA double down? Did things keep growing?
They absolutely did. The success was undeniable. Around 1960, they built an addition onto the original Studio B building.
For what? More studio space.
Primarily offices, more equipment storage, but also another smaller studio space called Studio D.
Studio D, what was that for?
Probably for things like vocal overdubs, maybe smaller sessions, solo artists, gave them more flexibility. And then later, they built a much larger Studio A right next door.
Studio A for bigger productions.
Yeah, suggests they needed space for larger ensembles, orchestras, maybe more complex setups as productions evolved. And of course, the gear inside Studio B itself was constantly being upgraded.
Keeping up with technology?
Always. If you picture the layout, Studio B itself and the echo chamber were in that original 2-story southeast corner. The new addition stretched along the north side, holding the control rooms, offices, Studio D.
Got it. And Chet Atkins, he remains central through all this.
Oh, completely indispensable. His leadership style was key. He created this really relaxed, collaborative vibe. He wasn't just the producer. He encouraged the musicians to bring their own ideas.
That must have been huge for creativity.
Definitely. And his ear for talent was just legendary. He signed Dolly Parton, Charlie Pride, Willie Nelson, Waylon Jennings. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Incredible roster.
His impact was so massive, RCA made him a vice president in 1968.
So Studio B was buzzing. Was it only for RCA artists, or did others get to record there?
No, it was in such high demand they rented it out constantly to other labels too.
Really? Who managed that?
Guy named Ed Hines, RCA's custom rep. He said back in '61, basically, everyone wants to come here because of the studio's reputation and that sound they were getting.
Which labels recorded there?
Oh, lots of big ones. Cadence, Warner Brothers recorded the Everly Brothers there.
The Everlys, wow.
Monument Records brought in Roy Orbison, Grandpa Jones, plus labels like Challenge, Chart, Chess. Tons of others used the space. It shows the studio's influence went way beyond just RCA's own style.
And Elvis, did he keep coming back through the 60s?
Oh yeah, Elvis was a fixture. Between '58 and '71, he recorded over 230 songs at Studio B.
230, that's staggering.
It really is. So many huge hits came out of those sessions. It's Now or Never, Are You Lonesome Tonight, Crying in the Chapel, Little Sister, just iconic tracks.
When was his last session there?
His final recording session at Studio B was June 10th, 1971. Kind of the end of an era, really.
Absolutely. All that history in one room. It's wild to think how much that studio shaped things.
It really helped make Nashville the global music center it is today. Hard to imagine it otherwise.
Speaking of Elvis's later work, wasn't there a big box set released a while back focusing on his final Nashville sessions?
Ah, yes, you mean the Back in Nashville set. Great collection. It covers his last big batch of recordings in Music City, which were in May and June of '71.
So right after that last Studio B date.
Just before and after, yeah. But interestingly, those sessions weren't actually at Studio B. They took place at a different studio called Music City Recorders.
Oh, okay. Good distinction. What was notable about those sessions?
Well, one thing was the heavy use of backup singers.
Yeah.
The Nashville edition, the Imperials. Really prominent vocals.
And the box set itself.
What's cool about the box set is how the mixing, done by Matt Ross Spang, often strips away some of the later overdubs. So you really get to hear Elvis's voice up front, raw, and the band's playing really shines.
What kind of material was it?
A real mix. Country, folk tunes, pop, gospel, even Christmas songs. Plus lots of outtakes, studio banter, just moments captured on tape. Vic Anasini did the mastering.
So a deep dive into his final Nashville work, even if not at Studio B itself. What was happening at Studio B in the later 70s? Did things start to change?
Yeah, the early '70s saw some big shifts. Chet Atkins, who'd been the heart of the place for so long, sadly got a cancer diagnosis in '73.
Oh, no.
And the next year, Jerry Bradley. Owen Bradley's son took over RCA's Nashville operations.
A changing of the guard.
Definitely. And under Jerry Bradley, an interesting album came out in 1976. Wanted. The Outlaws.
Yeah, the legendary Outlaw album.
Right. Willie, Waylon, Jesse Coulter, Tomple Glazer. Bradley compiled it mostly from existing RCA tracks, many of which, ironically, had been recorded back at Studio B.
Wow. So the birthplace of the Nashville sound also housed the roots of the outlaw movement that reacted against it.
Exactly. That album was huge, first country album ever to go platinum. Became the symbol of that whole outlaw thing, pushing back against the sometimes perceived slickness of the Nashville sound.
That's quite the legacy twist for Studio B. But eventually, the studio itself closed down.
Yeah. Sadly, RCA announced its closure in early 1977.
Why? What happened?
It came down to a long-running dispute with the engineers' union. Seems it was about artistic and technical control, flexibility in the studio. RCA basically said they couldn't operate viably anymore under the existing union rules there.
So it wasn't lack of business, but operational issues.
That was the stated reason, yeah. A real shame marked the end of a major chapter.
But thankfully, it wasn't torn down or anything. It's still there.
Oh, yeah. Thankfully, it was preserved. The Maddox family, who still own the building, were great. They let the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum use it for tours, educational stuff.
That's fantastic.
Then in '93, the Maddox Family Foundation donated the building to the museum. And shortly after, the Mike Curd Family Foundation bought it and leased it back to the museum for like $1 a year.
Wow, ensuring its future.
Exactly. So today, it's a huge tourist draw, part of the Hall of Fame tours. They run school programs there. And sometimes artists still record special projects there. Gillian Welch, Connie Smith. Yeah. They kept the tapes rolling occasionally.
That's wonderful. A living museum, almost. Let's talk about the building itself for a sec. What's it like architecturally?
It's actually pretty unassuming, you know.
Yeah.
A 1- and 2-story concrete block building, flat roof, very sort of functional mid-century modernist style.
Not ornate or anything?
No, not at all. The 2-story part in the southeast corner, that's where Studio B itself and the echo chamber are. The rest is mostly 1 story.
Any interesting details on the outside?
There are some subtle things. Checkered patterns in the concrete blocks near the entrance, some diamond-shaped relief patterns on one side, and of course that big red RCA Victor Studio sign on the north wall. That's pretty iconic.
Right. What about inside, the studio space itself?
Well, the floors originally were linoleum tiles, laid diagonally. And the walls in Studio B had these acoustic panels, Owens Corning 703 specifically.
For sound control.
Exactly. Arranged in this cool zigzag pattern.
Yeah.
That specific material is great for absorbing sound, making the room acoustically dead, very little natural echo, so engineers could control everything precisely.
Makes sense. Anything else?
Later on, they added carpet to the lower parts of the walls, probably for even more sound dampening.
Yeah.
Upstairs, the echo chamber walls and ceiling were plaster-coated with hard shellac to make them super reflective.
The opposite of the studio.
Right. And one really cool detail in Studio B, the lights. Originally fluorescent, but Elvis apparently didn't like them.
Oh, yeah.
So they installed these swivelly or brushed aluminum fixtures, and you could put different colored bulbs in them. Elvis's suggestion. So even the mood lighting has a story.
Huh. That's amazing. A touch of the king in the fixtures. So, bringing it to today, where does Studio B fit in the Nashville landscape?
Well, it sits right there on Music Row, which is now this massive global hub for music. Studio B's significance is just immense. It was absolutely key in turning Nashville into an international music city.
Primarily for country.
It's most closely associated with country for sure because of the Nashville sound and all the country legends who recorded there. But artists from all sorts of genres cut tracks there over the years.
So wrapping up this deep dive, what are the big takeaways? What should people remember about RCA Studio B?
I think the main thing is that it was so much more than just a recording studio. It was really a central character in how country music changed and evolved. It birthed a sound that went global.
Yeah.
From helping establish Nashville as Music City in the first place, to being Elvis's home base for recording, to defining that whole Nashville sound era. Its impact is just huge and still felt.
And maybe a surprising detail to leave people with.
I'd go back to that echo chamber.
Mm-hmm.
For country music at the time, having a dedicated purpose-built echo chamber was pretty novel. And that specific technology played such a massive role in crafting the sound of countless hits that came out of that room.
It really shaped the sound of an era.
Understanding Studio B's story, I think it just gives you a much deeper appreciation for the music, you know, and for all the forces, creative, technical business that shape the sounds we hear.
Definitely. Okay, final thought for everyone listening. If those studio walls could really talk, imagine the stories they haven't told yet.
Oh, man. Yeah. Tales of innovation, collaboration, maybe some artistic argument.
Right? Maybe your next deep dive could be into the tech side of early studios, or maybe the personal stories behind specific albums made right there at RCA Studio B. Lots more to explore.
Always is.
Thanks for joining us on this edition of The Deep Dive.